A big company might cut corners, and if it does, you can get hurt. If a dangerous product has harmed you or a loved one, the Rottenstein Law Group can help. For decades, doctors have been using so-called vaginal mesh to support or hold in women's pelvic organs to treat pelvic organ prolapse, a condition in which a woman's pelvic organs fall into or through her vaginal opening, and stress urinary incontinence, a condition marked by the involuntary leakage of urine. Physicians first started using general-purpose surgical mesh in the 1950s to treat abdominal hernias. In the 1970s, by cutting that same type of mesh into a different shape, doctors began using it to treat female POP and SUI. As the use of mesh in POP and SUI surgeries increased in popularity in the late 1990s, medical device companies began to develop and market mesh products in configurations designed specifically to treat those two conditions. In women, the front wall of the vagina supports the bladder. This wall can weaken or loosen with age. Significant bodily stress, such as childbirth, can also damage this part of the vaginal wall. If it deteriorates enough, a woman can suffer bladder prolapse, meaning the bladder is no longer supported and descends into the vagina. This may trigger problems such as urinary difficulties, discomfort, and stress incontinence, urine leakage caused by sneezing, coughing, exertion, etc. In operations called sling procedures, doctors will use surgical mesh to create a sling-like structure of support for a patient's urethra, bladder, or other organ. Unfortunately, complications with mesh products are causing women to bleed, swell up, develop infections, and experience debilitating pain. Not long ago, the public was given its first vaginal mesh FDA warning. That is, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration began to issue cautions about the complications and side effects associated with vaginal mesh products. In 2008, the FDA released its first public health communication cautioning doctors about the risks associated with surgical mesh. This warning was issued in response to the receipt of over 1,000 adverse event reports about surgical mesh products used to treat POP and SUI. Between 2008 and 2010, the number of serious complaints to the FDA about complications related to the use of surgical mesh to treat POP increased fivefold. Moreover, the agency's review of relevant scientific literature published from 1996 to 2011 showed that transvaginal POP repair with mesh does not improve symptomatic results or quality of life over traditional non-mesh repair. Accordingly, the FDA issued another safety communication on July 13, 2011, this time announcing that serious complications associated with surgical mesh for transvaginal repair of POP are not rare. The most consistently reported complication to arise in connection with the use of surgical mesh to treat prolapse has been erosion. The mesh wears through the vaginal mucosa and exposes its rough and uncomfortable surface to the patient and her partner. Patients also report instances of mesh contraction, or shrinkage. Other side effects that transvaginal mesh patients reported include bleeding, infection, pain, urinary problems, blood vessel, bladder, or bowel perforation, vaginal tightening, and pain during sex. There are many brands of surgical mesh, transvaginal mesh, and bladder slings on the market, but there have been recalls of very few. One product that was the subject of a recall is Boston Scientific's Protogen sling. Cleared for marketing by the FDA in 1997, the Protogen sling was rushed to market for financial reasons without adequate pre-market clinical trials, according to the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Boston Scientific issued a voluntary recall of the Protogen sling in 1999 after having received thousands of complaints. Another mesh product, OB tape, was also taken off the market by its manufacturer. There was no recall of OB tape, strictly speaking, but its manufacturer, Mentor Corporation, a company that was eventually taken over by Johnson & Johnson, discontinued the product a few years ago. Like the Protogen sling, OB tape was cleared for sale by the FDA without clinical proof of its safety and efficacy, according to the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. It, too, caused patients immeasurable harm before it was removed from shelves. Many brands of surgical mesh are still being used to treat women. Doctors are still using the Avalta system, for example, and the Johnson & Johnson surgical mesh product known as the Gynacare TVT is still being used, despite the fact that it was approved by the FDA based on its similarity to Boston Scientific's Protogen sling. In December 2008, all Mentor OB tape lawsuits pending in federal courts were consolidated for multi-district litigation in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Georgia before the Honorable Judge Clay D. Land. Multi-district litigation, or MDL, is a procedure used within the federal court system to transfer all pending civil cases of a similar type filed throughout the United States to a single federal judge in order to conduct all of the pretrial proceedings for the sake of efficiency. In October 2010, 36 lawsuits against Bard, manufacturer of one brand of problematic mesh, were consolidated for MDL in the Southern District of West Virginia. The number of included cases has since grown to nearly 300. Also in October 2010, Judge Carol E. Higbee of the Superior Court of New Jersey ruled in favor of centralized management for all current and future complaints against manufacturers J&J and Bard. More than 400 such cases have currently been filed. Not MDL, strictly speaking, but a sort of state-specific equivalent. If you received a surgical mesh that not only didn't help you as it was supposed to, but, worse, caused you harm, then you might be entitled to compensation from the manufacturer of that mesh. Only with the help of a lawyer will you have the best chance of receiving the most monetary compensation for the injuries you've suffered. If you're experiencing harmful side effects as a result of having received a surgical mesh implant, you deserve compensation for your injuries. That includes your out-of-pocket costs, lost wages, and pain and suffering. But don't expect the manufacturer of your mesh implant to volunteer to cover your expenses. In most instances, the best way to obtain the most compensation for your vaginal mesh injuries is to find a lawyer who is willing to file an individual lawsuit on your behalf. The claimants in individual lawsuits often recover fair amounts for their losses. Filing a lawsuit to recover compensation for injuries you've suffered as a result of a drug or medical device does not require that the drug or medical device be recalled. Many women have suffered as a result of vaginal mesh products that are still on the market, and they're filing lawsuits against vaginal mesh manufacturers to demand compensation for their injuries. The Rottenstein Law Group knows that you've suffered. You shouldn't have to go through more trouble to be compensated. RLG will be with you at every step of the process of demanding satisfaction, which we'll make as efficient as possible. You've taken enough. We'll take it from here.